If you have ever walked out of an interview sure you gave good answers, and still received the rejection, this recording is for you. You may already know the STAR approach: situation, task, action, result. Most candidates do, and that is exactly the problem. Knowing the 4 letters is not the same as using them well. And the gap between the two is where strong, capable candidates quietly lose the job to someone less qualified who simply answered better. What follows are 7 mistakes that sink STAR answers. For each one, I will show you the mistake itself, what to do instead, and the reason it works, so you understand it deeply enough to use it in any interview, for any role. None of these is about being a weaker candidate, nor did the diplomas. Everyone is about structure, and structure is something you can fix tonight. Let us begin. Mistake 1. Spending too long on the situation and the task. The mistake that costs you here is this. The interviewer asks for an example, and you begin at the very beginning. You explain the company, the team, the history of the project, everyone involved, and the background to the problem. By the time you reach what you actually did, the interviewer has quietly lost the thread, and you are running out of time for the part that matters. What to do instead? Keep the situation and the task short. Just 2 or 3 sentences that set the scene and make the stakes clear. Establish where you were, what the challenge was, and what you were responsible for, then move on quickly. A useful guide is to spend no more than 1/5 of your answer setting up the context. And here is why it works. The interviewer is not scoring your situation. They already understand it within a sentence or 2. They are waiting for the action, because that is where they assess your actual ability. Every extra second you spend on background is a second stolen from the part of the answer that decides whether you get the job. Get to what you did, and get there fast. Mistake 2. Saying we instead of saying I in the action. The mistake that costs you here is this. You describe what happened using the word we throughout. We decided. We built it. We solved the problem. You are being modest and giving the team its due. But the interviewer is left with no idea what you personally contributed. What to do instead? Describe the team context briefly in the situation if you need to, but in the action, switch deliberately to the word I. Say what you chose, what you decided, what you did with your own hands. Own your part plainly, even when the work was shared. And here is why it works. The interviewer cannot score a team. They can only score you. When your whole answer hides behind we, you give them nothing to mark, and a candidate who clearly owns their actions will be judged stronger even if their example is smaller. This is the most common STAR mistake of all, and the easiest to fix. Replace we with I in the part that matters, and your contribution finally becomes visible. Mistake 3. Giving vague actions with no real detail. The mistake that costs you here is this. You describe what you did in broad, empty phrases. I took ownership. I led the project. I handled the situation. It sounds confident, but it tells the interviewer nothing about how you actually think or work. What to do instead? Make your actions specific. Name the steps you took, the tools or systems you used, the choices you weighed, and the order you did things in. Instead of saying you took ownership, say you restructured the plan into 3 stages, moved the riskiest tasks to the start to expose problems early, and set up short daily check-ins to keep everyone aligned. And here is why it works. Vague language could come from anyone, and it lets the interviewer imagine that a cheaper or less experienced candidate could have done the same. Specific detail proves it was you. It shows your judgment, your method, and your skill in a way that cannot be copied or dismissed. The detail is the evidence, and without evidence, even a true story sounds hollow. Mistake 4. Giving a weak result, or no result at all. The mistake that costs you here is this. You describe the situation and your actions well, and then you stop, or you finish with a soft, empty ending. It went well. The team was happy. Things worked out in the end. None of those is a real result, and the answer trails off just as it should be, landing its strongest blow. What to do instead? Always close with a clear outcome. Where you can, put a number on it: the time saved, the money raised, the target beaten. Where you cannot, give a concrete qualitative result instead, such as the client renewing their contract, the feedback you received, or the new process being adopted across the team. And here is why it works. The result is the proof that your actions mattered. Without it, the interviewer has heard a story with no ending and no impact, and a story with no impact is quickly forgotten. A clear, specific outcome turns your answer from a description of effort into evidence of value. And value is what earns the offer. Mistake 5. Giving a result that does not matter to the employer. The mistake that costs you here is this. You end with a strong, even impressive outcome, but it has nothing to do with what this particular role cares about. You are interviewing for a role about delivery and deadlines, and your proud result is about team morale. It is a real achievement, but it answers a question the employer did not ask. What to do instead? Before you choose your outcome, if the role is about saving money, lead with the money you saved. If it is about hitting deadlines, lead with the deadline you protected. Match the impact you highlight to the impact the employer is hiring for. And here is why it works. Two candidates can describe the same achievement, and the one whose result speaks directly to the role will always score higher. The interviewer is trying to picture you doing this job, not your last one. When your outcome maps onto their priorities, you make that picture easy to see, and you prove you understand what success looks like in their world, not just in yours. Mistake 6. Choosing the wrong example and never quite answering the question. The mistake that costs you here is this. The interviewer asks about a specific skill, and you reach for a story on the spot. It is a good story, one you are proud of, but it does not really fit the question, and as you talk you drift further from what was actually asked. You finish having told a fine story that answered the wrong thing. What to do instead? Prepare a bank of strong examples before the interview, each mapped to a skill the role is likely to test, so you are choosing the right story rather than inventing one under pressure. And listen carefully to the actual question. If it asks about handling conflict, give a conflict story, not a leadership one that happens to be nearby. And here is why it works. Coming up with an example in the moment is how candidates ramble, lose focus, and miss the question entirely. A prepared, well-matched story keeps you concise and on target, and it shows the interviewer you can listen, understand what is being asked, and respond directly. Answering the real question is itself a skill they are quietly assessing. Mistake 7. Telling a strong story you never tie back to the job description, the person specification, the essential criteria, and reflection on lessons learnt. The mistake that costs you here is this. You deliver a well-structured answer, a clear situation, strong actions, a solid result, and you leave it there. You never connect it to the job description, the person specification, or the essential criteria the panel is marking against, and you never offer any reflection on what you learnt. You assume the relevance is obvious. But the panel is sitting with a scoring sheet built from those exact criteria, and if you do not draw the line for them, they may not draw it for you. What to do instead? Before the interview, take the essential criteria and the person specification, and choose a story that directly evidences each one. In your answer, make the link explicit. Name the skill or quality the role asks for, and show how your example proves it, using the same language the advert and the specification use. Then close with a brief reflection on lessons learnt, showing what the experience taught you and how you would carry it into this role. And here is why it works. The panel is comparing every candidate against the same fixed list of criteria, and a strong story that floats free of those criteria scores lower than a plainer one that lands squarely on them. When you mirror the language of the specification, show the panel exactly which requirement your example satisfies, and add your reflection on what you learnt, you make their job easy. You tick the box they are looking for, and you prove not just that you can tell a good story, but that you understood the question, grew from the experience, and know why it matters for this role. Those are the 7 mistakes. Look back across them, and you will see one thread running through all 7. None of them was about being a weaker candidate. Each was about structure, focus, and making your value impossible to miss. Keep the setup short. Own your actions with the word I. Be specific. Land a clear result. Make that result matter to the role. Choose the right story. And tie it all back to what the panel is actually looking for. Master these, and the STAR approach stops being a formula you fill in, and becomes a way of showing an interviewer, quickly and clearly, exactly why you are the right person for the job. If this helped, subscribe before you go, so the next recording reaches you when you need it. You already have the experience. Now go and let them see it.